The horse's hooves echoed like a heartbeat in the dark hallway. And for a moment I thought everything was about to fall apart. One loud neigh, one wrong turn, and the whole care home would know what we were doing. But I wasn't doing this for me. I was doing it for Mr. Crawford, the man who whispered his final wish with a shaking voice. I just want to see a horse. One last time. I never planned on breaking any rules at the care home. I was the kind of person who followed every guideline, every checklist, every tiny note taped to the wall. But everything changed the day I found Mr. Crawford staring at an old, worn-out photograph. It was small and faded, almost colorless. But you could still see the outline of a proud horse standing next to a younger version of him. His fingers moved across the picture as if he was touching a memory that had been locked. Deep inside him for years, Mr. Crawford didn't talk much. Most days, he hardly spoke at all. But that morning, when I sat beside him, he lifted the photo slightly, like he wanted me to notice it. His voice was soft, cracked, and slow. "Her name was Daisy," he said. That was all. Just one sentence. But in that moment, it felt like he had opened a door to a story he had held close for decades. I asked him gently, "Was she your horse?" He nodded, and I watched his eyes glow in a way I hadn't seen before. He told me Daisy wasn't just a horse, she was his partner, his pride, the reason he woke up every day when he was younger. He trained her, won races with her, and spent almost every hour by her side. She'd been gone for many years, but the memory of her lived in his heart as if she had never left, as he spoke. His hand began to shake, not from fear, but from the weight of the memories he carried. Then he whispered something that froze me. "I wish I could see a horse again. Just once. Before I go." The way he said "before I go" felt heavy. Like he was preparing for something he didn't want to say out loud. I didn't know how to reply. All I could do was hold the moment with him. I could hear the machines in the room, the soft footsteps in the hallway, the usual sounds of the care home, but everything felt distant. My eyes went back to the photo. Daisy stood there proudly beside him, frozen in time, beautiful and strong. And beside me sat the same man, now older, weaker, and fading a little more each day, holding on to a memory he feared would be his last. That was when the thought first entered my mind, a wild, impossible idea. A horse. In a care home. It sounded insane, but the sadness in Mr. Crawford's eyes was stronger than any rule written in the building. I knew what this moment meant to him. I knew what this wish meant. And I knew I couldn't let him leave this world without. Feeling that old joy one last time, that was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I decided I would bring a horse to him. No matter what it took. The idea of bringing a horse into a care home should have disappeared the moment it formed in my mind. It should have been one of those thoughts you laugh at for a second and then forget forever. But that didn't happen. Instead, it stayed with me sitting in my chest, growing heavier every minute I walked through the quiet halls. Every time I passed Mr. Crawford's room and saw that photo resting on his bedside table, the idea pushed a little harder. It whispered, "Do something." I knew I couldn't ask permission. The answer would be a fast, sharp no with a long speech about safety rules, health codes, and a list of reasons that would fill a notebook. Even thinking about asking felt like a waste of time. So the only choice left was to plan this myself, quietly, carefully, and without getting caught that night. After everyone was asleep or pretending to be, I sat in the staff break room with a notebook and a cup of old, bitter coffee. The building was silent, except for the soft buzzing of the vending machine. I opened the notebook and wrote one line at the top, Operation Daisy. It made me smile for a second, and immediately scared me. What kind of person names a secret plan to smuggle a horse into a care home? Apparently, me. The first step was figuring out how big a horse actually was. I'd seen horses before, but never really thought about their size. So I pulled out my phone and typed, "How big is a horse?" The answer made me stare at the screen in shock. I whispered, "No way." A full-grown horse could be taller than most doorways in the building. The hallways were narrow. The floors were slippery. Everything about this mission already felt impossible. But then I remembered Mr. Crawford's smiles. Smile. Quiet but real when he talked about Daisy. And suddenly, impossible didn't matter. I knew I needed help. Not many people would join a mission this ridiculous. But there was one person I trusted, Lena, the night shift nurse who had a habit of breaking rules only when kindness was involved. The next day I pulled her aside and told her the truth, not the crazy plan, just the wish. When I said, "He wants to see a horse one last time," she didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She just sighed and whispered, "Poor man, that was my chance." So I leaned in and said quietly, "I think we can make it happen." "You're kidding?" But then after a long silence, she smiled in that mischievous way she always did before saying yes to something she shouldn't. "Okay," she whispered. "Tell me the plan." And just like that, the mission became real. No turning back. No second thoughts. We had a promise to keep a horse, to bring inside a place where a horse absolutely did not belong. The morning we chose for the mission didn't feel like a normal day. The air around the care home felt heavier, as if the walls already knew we were about to break every rule written in the building's handbook. I walked in pretending everything was normal, but inside my chest, my heartbeat felt like it was trying to punch its way out. Lena gave me a quick nod from across the hallway, the kind of nod that says, "If this goes badly, I'm blaming you." The plan had 3 parts. Bring the horse as close as possible. Distract the staff, and hope the universe didn't punish us. Simple. In theory, we had arranged for Daisy Jr., a calm, gentle mare belonging to a friend of Lena, to arrive behind the care home in the small garden area. The garden was quiet and usually empty, except for a few birds and the occasional cat that strutted around like it owned the place. It wasn't a stable, but it was the closest thing we had. When I stepped outside to check if the coast was clear, I froze. There she was. Daisy Jr. stood tall and peaceful, her brown coat shining in the weak sunlight. For a second, all the tension slipped away. She looked like she understood the assignment. Her soft eyes almost said, "Let's do this." But her calm didn't last. The moment she saw me holding the bag of carrots, she let out a loud snort. Not just any snort, one that echoed off the brick walls like a warning siren. I panicked and placed a hand on her neck. I whispered, even though whispering at a horse felt ridiculous. She ignored me and nudged the bag hard enough to almost knock it out of my hand. Lena rushed outside, eyes wide. "If she makes noise like that inside," she whispered, "we're done." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Then we need to move fast." Our first obstacle came sooner than expected. The back door leading into the hallway was smaller than I remembered. I measured it twice in my head. Daisy Jr. looked at the doorway, then at me, as if asking, "Are you sure about this?" I wasn't sure about anything, but quitting wasn't an option anymore. We slowly guided her forward. Her hooves made dull, heavy thumps that felt louder than thunder to me. Every step she took made the ground vibrate. Lena kept peeking over her shoulder, expecting a nurse to appear at any second, hands on hips, ready to kick us out forever. Halfway through the doorway, Daisy Jr. stopped, completely froze. I pushed gently. Nothing. Lena tried offering a carrot like a bribe. Still nothing. It was like the horse suddenly remembered she wasn't supposed to be indoors and decided to protest. And then, like the universe testing us, one of the night shift nurses walked by the end of the hallway. My breath stopped. Lena reacted instantly, stepping into the hallway and starting the most over-the-top conversation about paperwork I had ever heard. The nurse slowed, confused, but didn't look past her. Meanwhile, I pressed my forehead against Daisy Jr.'s and whispered, "Please. Just one step." For him, it was crazy. It was desperate. But something about that quiet plea worked. She moved, one step, then another, until she was inside a horse, in the hallway, in a place where even a roller suitcase was considered too noisy. Lena hurried back, eyes shining with disbelief. "We actually did it," she whispered. But this was only the beginning. Now we had to get Daisy Jr. all the way to the garden entrance, where we planned to bring Mr. Crawford without anyone catching us, without her making another sound, and without the entire building discovering the strangest sight it had ever seen. We weren't just sneaking a horse inside anymore. We were racing against time rules, luck itself. I thought getting a horse through one doorway would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The real problem waited for us deeper inside the building. Where the quiet hallway curved toward the garden exit we assumed would be big enough. We had checked it at night, but in the dark, everything looks bigger, safer, easier. In daylight, surrounded by rules and reality, the truth hit us like a punch. The door wasn't wide enough. I stood there, staring at the narrow frame, feeling my stomach drop. The sunlight outside spilled through the glass panels, warm and welcoming. But the doorway that led to that sunlight was barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. A horse walking through it. Not unless she magically shrank to half her size. Lena whispered, This can't be happening." Her voice was thin, shaky, like she was standing on the edge of laughing or crying. Daisy Jr. nudged my shoulder gently, unaware of the disaster in front of us. She was calm. It made the situation feel even more impossible. I pressed my forehead against the cool metal doorframe and tried to think. We had come too far to stop. Mr. Crawford was waiting. He didn't know what we were doing, but he was waiting for something. He felt it. I couldn't let disappointment be the thing that arrived at his bedside. I looked around, scanning the hallway like it could suddenly offer a miracle. Then it hit me, not the door, but the space beyond it. The garden wasn't the only place he could meet Daisy Jr. if we couldn't bring the horse to him. Maybe we could bring him to the horse. It was risky. It flipped the entire plan sideways, but it was the only option that didn't end with us giving up. I turned to Lena. "We bring him out here," I whispered. "We wheel him outside instead." Her eyes widened. "Without permission? During rounds? With staff everywhere?" "Yes," I said. "Because he only gets one last chance. And this is it." She didn't argue. She didn't question. She just nodded because she knew I was right. If we waited for approval, we'd lose the moment. Moments like these didn't survive paperwork, but the sky, which had been clear just minutes earlier, was suddenly darkening. A slow, soft drizzle began tapping against the window's light at first, then heavier. The storm rolled in silently, like it had been waiting for the perfect moment to test us. Rain meant trouble. Wet ground meant slipping. Cold air meant danger for a man as fragile as Mr. Crawford. But the idea of stopping after days of planning, after getting Daisy Jr. inside, after standing at the edge of success, felt like a betrayal. Lena bit her lip. "We can still do this," she said, but her voice trembled. I looked back at Daisy Jr., who stood there patiently, her eyes full of a quiet trust I didn't deserve. She had walked through a doorway meant for humans, followed two strangers into a building she'd never seen, and stood silently, despite every instinct telling her she shouldn't be here. She had done her part. Now it was our turn. "We'll get him outside," I said softly. "Rain or not, we'll cover him. We'll move slow. But we're doing this." The storm outside rumbled lightly, warning us. The clock kept ticking. We had no choice but to push forward. One rule broke when the horse entered the hallway. 100 more would break before this day was done. The hallway felt longer than ever as we pushed Mr. Crawford's wheelchair toward the garden door. Rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. The air inside held a heavy silence. Mr. Crawford didn't know what was happening. His thin hands rested in his lap, trembling slightly from age, not fear. He looked up at me with tired eyes, the kind that had seen decades of life but were slowly losing their spark. "Where? Are we going?" he whispered. I forced a calm smile to hide the storm racing inside me. "Somewhere special," I said, hoping the words didn't sound as desperate as they felt. Lena walked beside me, holding a warm blanket around his shoulders to shield him from the cold air seeping in through the door. He trusted us completely, without even knowing the reason, and that trust tightened something in my chest. The moment the door swung open, a soft chill washed over us. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, almost like it had decided to be kind. The garden smelled like wet grass and earth. The gray sky hung low. But somehow the world felt softer than it had minutes before. We eased the wheelchair outside. Mr. Crawford blinked against the light, confused for a moment. Then it happened. A sound broke the silence. Quiet, gentle snort. Soft, warm, recognizable. His entire body went still, slowly, as if he feared the moment would vanish if he moved too fast. He turned his head to the right. And there she was. Daisy Jr. stood a few feet away, her head lowered, her eyes soft and warm. Rain dotted her coat, making it shimmer in the weak light. She looked like a memory stepping out of the past. Mr. Crawford's lips parted, but no words came out. His eyes filled, not with sadness, but something deeper, something that rose from a place he hadn't touched in years. Joy, shock, love, all tangled together. He lifted his hand, slowly, trembling not from weakness, but from emotion. It hovered in the air, unsure, like he was afraid she wasn't real. Daisy Jr. took a single step forward, closing the space between them. Then she lowered her head and gently pressed her muzzle into his palm. The breath he released sounded like a man finding peace after a long journey. Lena covered her mouth to hide the tears forming in her eyes. I felt mine build too, blurring the edges of the moment. But nothing, not the rain, not the risk, not the fear could touch the purity of what we were seeing. "It's her," Mr. Crawford whispered, even though it wasn't. But I didn't correct him. This wasn't a moment for details. It was a moment for heart. He stroked Daisy Jr.'s face with a tenderness that made time slow down. His fingers traced the shape of her jaw, the way someone touches a memory they thought they'd lost forever. Daisy Jr. closed her eyes, leaning into his hand with complete trust. For a few long seconds, the world disappeared. It was just a man and a horse to souls reconnecting across years of distance and loss. The rain softened to mist. The garden seemed to hold its breath, and Mr. Crawford smiled a smile so warm, so deep, so full of life that it erased every fear I'd carried since this plan began. This wasn't just a reveal. It was a reunion between a man's past and the last piece of happiness he had left. For a moment, it felt like the world stood still. The only sound was the soft rhythm of Daisy Jr.'s breathing as she leaned into Mr. Crawford's shaking hand. His frail fingers sank gently into her warm coat, and he let out a soft laugh, quiet, fragile, but filled with real joy. It was the kind of sound you don't hear often in places like this, a sound that made time feel kinder. But time didn't stay frozen for long. A sharp gasp broke through the calm. I turned to see a nurse standing by the garden door, her eyes wide, her clipboard hanging loosely from her hand. She looked from the horse to us, then back at the horse again, as if her brain was struggling to accept reality. "What? What is happening here?" she whispered. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How do you explain something like this? How do you tell someone you smuggled a horse into a care home because a dying man wished for one last moment of happiness? Before I could speak, Lena stepped forward. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were full of emotion. "He needed this," she said softly. "Just look at him." The nurse hesitated. She took a small step forward, then another, until she stood behind Mr. Crawford's wheelchair. When she saw his face, the pure joy glowing in his tired eyes, her posture changed. Her shoulders relaxed. The tension in her expression melted away. She whispered, "Oh my. He hasn't smiled like that in months." And just like that, she wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't thinking about rules or consequences. She was just another person witnessing something special, something rare, something worth breaking every rule for. More staff members slowly appeared, drawn by the unusual quiet outside. They stopped at the doorway, shocked at first, whispering to each other. But as soon as they saw Mr. Crawford's expression, their whispers softened into warm silence. No one tried to stop us. No one tried to take Daisy Jr. away. No one told us we were wrong. Instead, one of the nurses walked forward with a blanket and wrapped it gently around Mr. Crawford's shoulders. Even though he didn't seem to notice the cold anymore, another nurse wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. A third whispered, "Let him have this. Just this once." Daisy Jr. lowered her head again, brushing her muzzle against Mr. Crawford's cheek. He closed his eyes, breathing in deeply, as if trying to memorize her scent. That single moment seemed to lift years off his face. He looked peaceful. He looked content. He looked complete. The drizzle softened into nothing. The clouds broke open just enough for a pale beam of sunlight to touch the garden, landing gently across Mr. Crawford's lap like a blessing. No alarms rang. No doctor rushed out yelling. The world simply allowed the moment to exist. We all stood there, not workers, not caretakers, not rule enforcers, but human beings sharing something fragile and beautiful. In that little garden, with rain fading and hearts full, it felt like the universe itself had paused to say, let him have this one last piece of happiness. For a long time, none of us moved. We just stood there, watching the quiet bond between a man and the last living reminder of the life he once had. Mr. Crawford kept, his eyes closed as Daisy Jr.'s warm breath brushed his cheek. His trembling hand rested against her neck, steady now. As if her presence had given him strength he'd forgotten he still had. The staff didn't ask questions anymore. They didn't whisper. They simply stayed close, holding their own breath as if they were scared to break the magic of the moment. Even Lena, who was usually the first to joke or panic, stood silent beside me. The rain clouds drifted apart little by little, letting thin light fall through the gray morning.